is because when I was a kid, there was this TV show of a Spanish guy who traveled all around the world looking for bizarre animals and strange species and so on. And all my life I said something like, oh, that's what I want to do with my life. Yeah. And then I realized that he was not a scientist.
I can't deny that my father is a physicist, so that was a big influence. Always to, we lean towards mathematics and physics.
The first person that actually got me into science, they were my 7th grade teacher, and she was doing her PhD at the time, but also teaching. And so she taught genetics, and it was an amazing experience. I didn't know what science was or how to view science, and she made it fun.
And then I put my first microscope in focus. This is really lame, but it's really what happened. Put my first microscope in focus, and I was absolutely amazed. And it's pretty much still when I managed to get a microscope in focus. I enjoy it, so.
And then when I was in high school, I accidentally went to a class where you have like 2 afternoons you can do science in wherever you want to go. So then I went there, and then I started to first playing with the pipettes and so on, and then I was like, it's fun.
And then when it was time to apply to college, I knew that I was going to study physics. Like, it had to be physics, and that was a given. And when I got there, I discovered it just kept going deeper and deeper into both physics and math, and it was fun. And and ever since then, I've sort of been lost in science.
So we were just introduced with genetics and the DNA model from Watson and Crick. So basically, these are chemicals and how they basically led to such an evolution of such a complex organisms like humans. So that was very interesting.
I was interested in biology since I was a child, but just doing biology in the class was fun. Looking at the world around was nice. Keeping doing it in school, in high school, in the university, I think I just didn't want to stop.
When I was a kid, I liked to play in our courtyard, mixing and mashing flower petals and leaves and making all those colored liquids. And I was always fantasized that I was a scientist, discovering drugs from plants and all those stuff.
Especially the biophysics and biology, I find it's a beautiful subject, and often you find things that really blow your mind. And I think that's a very lucky find.
My junior year, I actually met a professor, and I randomly picked the course because I didn't know what it was about, and it was a cytoskeleton course. And without taking cell biology, I entered this course by mistake. And then I fell in love with actin.
It's not, I'm doing science because I want to change the world, I want to discover it. No, it's I'm having fun.
I have fun, it's nice. So why should I stop and try to get a job that I would find boring?
I would say that my lab is my home, and that also my colleagues and my partners are my family.
I love being in the lab. I mean, lab is my home, and my colleagues are my family. We are more friends than colleagues.
Just how amazing it is to know and realize that everybody thinks very differently about a certain problem. I think that's what keeps me going, and I love talking to people about just seeing what takes them and how they are thinking about a problem.
I found the same enthusiasms and things I love about people in science here in Argentina or in any other country. I think that is something we all have in common, the passion we have.
I think what I like in science is that we can do really different things. I mean, I'm not only studying or reading papers, we do that, but we are doing constructing, building the tools that we will use after, play a bit with, especially in neuroscience, play a bit with a bit of chemistry, a bit of physics. So the fact that it's really broad.
And science is one field where it's like new every day. You read papers, you get to know new stuff, and you apply those things daily in your life, in your lab, and it keeps you on some kind of edge.
science involved being very energetic, being creative, and always wanted to learn more. So there's nothing that really fully satisfies you. So when you reach an answer, you really want to go for more afterwards. And I really like that feeling that your work is never done.
I feel extremely pleased about learning. I've always liked to learn, and I feel like being a scientist is a way you can learn all the time. And instead of learning from books, as you do when you're a student, you learn from nature itself.
There's always more left to learn. Like, even after you answer a question, that leads to another question, which leads to another question, which leads to another question. So, like, there's never an end, and it's awesome.
The fact that you're a bit free to do whatever you want, you have an idea that is usually not so nice, but you try stuff, see what happened, try the next one, and I mean, that's the process. The process is at least as fun as the result that you have at the end.
You have to figure out your own question and then addressing your own way, which is more like freely, so that you feel more responsible for your own questions and then feel like, oh, I really need to know these things because this is my precious.
I like the freedom in terms of what I do every day. I get to plan it myself and decide, and also you have a question that, you know, that is yours and you can take it in any direction that you want.
Well, in the beginning of undergrad, I was a theater major, and I was always performing on stage, and I loved to express myself that way. But then when I took this course, which was on biotechnology, I realized that I can filter my creativity in another way by doing experiments and kind of just unraveling different pieces of the puzzle of how the body works.
And it's a really creative process. So to answer the next question, you have to come up with a new experiment or a new technique.
And this is a very good avenue to be very creative and come up with solutions yourself. Although it involves a lot of struggle, but it makes you feel good at the end of the day.
I really enjoy the problem-solving thing that science has. So you have a question you're really interested in and that you really want to answer. So you have to like put your brains in there and use your skills and help from other people inside your lab or outside and try to solve that question.
I like to do science because I like to be challenged. From a very early age, I always ask questions, and I think it's fun. I think not knowing is fun, and then when you find out that overarching question, which sometimes you don't, you're still learning.
Especially if you're doing trying to tackle an unanswered question. It's like you're on the horizon. No one's been there before, supposedly, and you're kind of. It sort of feels like you're exploring a space for the first time.
I get bored really easily, basically, and I really like a challenge. And so science was a good way to keep myself interested and constantly frustrated. But yeah, I got into it because I wanted to solve problems that other people couldn't and to spend my time doing something that was worthwhile to me.
I like doing science because it's just the joy of getting answers by myself when I'm struggling with a question.
And eventually what we do in science, so we're generating knowledge and we can understand better ourselves and the world around us. So I think it's fascinating and I really enjoy doing it.